A large bulk moves through the undergrowth. Munching through the ferns, the brightly coloured plates that project from its high back make its presence known. This animal is small compared to the giants that surround it, but it will not be ignored. It is the most heavily armed and deadly herbivore of its age. Welcome to this dinosaur profile on Stegosaurus. Since its discovery, this has been one of the most recognisable dinosaurs, its distinctive and bizarre outline paying tribute to the myriad of weird forms of prehistoric life. But before we begin, there are two figurative elephants in the room that I have to deal with. The first began in 1982 in the Far Side comic by Gary Larson. In it, a caveman in a parody of a lecture points to the famous spikes on a Stegosaurus's tail and says, "Now this end is called the thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons." Initially, the only impact of this was people pointing out that humans appeared over 60 million years after all non-avian dinosaurs went extinct, and almost double that since Stegosaurus went extinct. That was until 1993, when Denver Museum of Nature and Science paleontologist Ken Carpenter used the term thagomizer when describing a fossil at the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. After this, thagomizer has been used as an informal anatomical term in various museums, books, and television programs. Dr. Susie Maidment, paleontologist at London's Natural History Museum and world-renowned expert on Stegosaurus, has stated,
"The idea that we didn't have a name for spikes is not the case because we had the word spike. Right. I just don't think it's necessary for us to generate more jargon in a field with jargon in it. And people kind of slightly annoying. It's a great cartoon, it's very funny, but they have started to use it annoyingly regularly in descriptions of things, which always leads to a groan.
While I respect Dr. Maidment and will be referring to a lot of her work in this video, on this point I must disagree, and I will be using the term thagomizer at every opportunity. My reasoning? Thagomizer is an awesome name and I just like saying it. Second elephant, Stegosaurus's brain. There are tiers of knowledge regarding Stegosaurus's famous brain. The lowest and most common is that Stegosaurus had a brain the size of a walnut. This was taken to extremes by the likes of Arthur Conan Doyle, writer of The Lost World, who believed that dinosaurs had no brain function, acted on reflex, and would have to be shot multiple times for their bodies to realise that they were dead. The second tier is most common in America, informed by books and television documentaries. It is widespread enough to be mentioned in television programs like Fringe and films like Pacific Rim. This is the theory that Stegosaurus had such a small brain because it had a second brain in its lower spine. This idea originated in the 1870s with a paleontologist who first described Stegosaurus and thought its brain was too small compared to its body. The third tier is more varied on the information that they know, but unified that they know that the second brain theory is ridiculous, and that other theories about dinosaurs from the 19th century should be viewed with scrutiny. No vertebrate has anything resembling a second brain. The closest is the octopus, which has nerve groups or ganglia for each of its 8 arms. The cavity in the hip exists in other non-avian dinosaurs and modern birds with no second brain in sight. It contains a glycogen body, a bit like an energy store, the exact purpose of which is still unknown, but may play into increased neural activity. The actual brain, while small, was not the size of a walnut. It was about 80 grams, about the size of a puppy's. It was probably also a bird brain, which has a high density of neurons, making it more efficient than a mammal's or reptile's. It is still one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur, but walking, eating, and raging against anything that wants to eat you doesn't require that much brain power. Terminology defined, myths busted, we can begin. The story of Stegosaurus' discovery begins in North America in 1877. Two of America's most prominent paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope were feuding about who was the best in what would become known as the Bone Wars. Marsh found the dinosaur in the now famous Morrison Formation and called it Stegosaurus, meaning roof lizard, believing that the jumble of plates found with the skeleton were laid across the back, making it look like an armadillo. After naming the first Stegosaurus species Armatus in 1877, Marsh proceeded to find numerous Stegosaurus species. In 1879, Stegosaurus ungulatus. In 1881, Diracodon laticeps, I'll come back to this. In 1882, Stegosaurus affinis, and in 1887, Stegosaurus duplex, stenops, and sulcatus. The bad news is that Marsh and Cope thought that a good measure of their contest was how many species they found. And as Goodhart's law states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Stegosaurus armatus was based on fragmentary evidence and later found to be the same as S. stenops. Diracodon was described from a single jawbone and also found to be from Stegosaurus and probably S. stenops. S. affinis was described from a single pubis, which has since been lost. S. duplex, which started the whole second brain debacle, was identified by Marsh as being similar to S. ungulatus, but had a different sacrum, forgetting he had never actually found an S. ungulatus sacrum, and thought that because he found no plates or spikes, it had none. Unsurprisingly, it was found to be the same as S. ungulatus, so in Marsh's fervour to find as many species as possible, he had turned 3 species into 7. Then, over 100 years later, Susie Maidment and co. came in to make things worse for him. They looked at all the available Stegosaurus data and concluded that Stegosaurus stenops and ungulatus were not different enough to be different species, and put them together into Stegosaurus armatus, using the first Stegosaurus species name. S. sulcatus was out, its extra-large thagomizers possibly being shoulder spikes. Hesperosaurus was brought in as S. majosi, and Wuerhosaurus as S. homheni, after it was decided that the short plates were a result of a deformed fossil. Later still, Hesperosaurus was taken out of the group, and S. armatus was reclassified as S. stenops by the International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature in 2013, deciding that S. stenops was a better model to base later identifications on. Now, the animal. Stegosaurus stenops was the earlier Jurassic Stegosaurus from the United States and Portugal. A full-grown adult could be 9 meters long. The smaller and later S. homheni from China is estimated to have been 7 meters long. Let's start off with the obvious, those massive plates. Paleontologists have spent over a century arguing what they were used for. The weirdest suggestion was from Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan at Earth's Core, where a character is attacked by a Stegosaurus which jumps off a cliff and uses its place to glide down and attack. More credible ideas are defense, temperature regulation, and display. An articulated Stegosaurus ended the debate about how the plates were arranged, and lack of muscle attachments showed that they couldn't be pointed at an attacker, like some had claimed. The bony plates were covered in blood vessels, and investigation on the Stegosaur Hesperosaurus reveals that they had some kind of covering, probably keratin, the material that makes up beaks and horns. Stegosaurus was a thyreophoran, a group of dinosaurs which specialised in armoured hides. Skin impressions have showed that they were covered in tough scales, losing any fluff that their ancestors might have had. They also had small bones under the skin around the throat, protecting it like chainmail against cuts and punctures. The plates were brittle, and having a flow of blood through your armour is not a good idea. The possibility of a keratin covering could have helped though. A Stegosaurus from the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry shows a neck plate with an Allosaurus-shaped bite taken out of it. Having practically no meat, this was an odd part to scavenge, and so was probably the result of an active fight. This suggests that if there was a covering, it was not very thick, and that while they may not have been designed for it, these plates had some part to play in defense. Temperature regulation is often brought up, the idea being that by turning towards the sun, the blood in the plates would warm up the rest of the body, or that they could act as radiators, releasing excess heat like an elephant's ears. Opinion on this view has shifted from the former to the latter as evidence has increased that dinosaurs were warm-blooded. This is also affected by the covering suggestion, as a thick covering would reduce this ability. Also, the impressions of the covering show no signs of pits or waves, which would help this function, as is the case with some bighorn cows and birds. What about display? A recent theory was that display would be heightened by increased blood flow to the plates, making them blush and appear more vibrant. The presence of keratin would prevent this, but not a general display. Many birds use colourful keratin in their beaks, like puffins and toucans. If you look at other stegosaurs, Stegosaurus abandons the defensive spikes for broader structures. It also alternates its plates while many others were paired. To me, the plates seem adapted for display, although my word will not be the last on this matter. The thagomizers have long been thought to be protective weapons, and later evidence only seems to strengthen that proposition. Some thagomizers at least stuck outward from the tail rather than standing upright as in previous reconstructions. Unlike some stegosaur relatives, they had no stiff tendons on their tails, making them very flexible, offering a range of swing. Also, an analysis of Stegosaurus thagomizers showed almost 10% had injuries, including bits broken off. If any final evidence was needed, an Allosaurus from the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry, yes, that place again, was found with a hole in its tail vertebra. This was thought to have come from another Allosaurus, until it was revealed that a Stegosaurus thagomizer fit beautifully into that hole. That injury healed, so the Allosaurus survived, but the healing was around the hole, not inside it, suggesting that the keratin sheath of the thagomizer broke off in the Allosaurus and remained stuck there. Stegosaurus had odd limbs. Its feet had spongy pads to help the toes support weight, as elephants do today. Its forelegs were far shorter than its hind legs. It could only move as fast as its little front legs would allow, giving it a maximum speed of 3.7 to 4.3 miles per hour, about as fast as a human power walking. While slow, the legs were strong. In fact, by keeping its hind legs still and shifting its front legs, Stegosaurus could easily turn its tail towards an attacker. The difference in the legs meant that the tail was held high while the head was low to the ground. This leads most to think that Stegosaurus ate low mosses, ferns, cycads, and fruits. There is also the controversial idea that Stegosaurus could rear up onto their hind legs and browse from low trees. This would require a forceful bite to snip off green twigs. The same study that determined the bite force of Plateosaurus also looked at Stegosaurus. It concluded that Stegosaurus had a bite strength similar to a cow or a sheep, meaning it could deal with woody, tough material. There is still debate, as it did not use a teeth battery system like hadrosaurs, or use gastroliths in the stomach like sauropods. Stegosaurus tracks indicate that they moved in herds with adults and young. A few young Stegosaurus have been found, showing that the plates remained small until the animal reached maturity, and then grew quickly. Quick note, no one has a good idea of how Stegosaurus mated with those plates in the way. Helpful features like muscle attachments for a mobile penis or a baculum or penis bone, both of which are fairly common in the animal kingdom, have not been found associated with Stegosaurus. The two species of Stegosaurus lived in very different times and places. Stegosaurus stenops lived in the late Jurassic, about 155 million years ago, while S. homheni was from the early Cretaceous, about 130 million years ago, hanging on as the stegosaurs declined. S. stenops has been found in the famous Morrison Formation in America, and the equivalent Lourinhã Formation in Portugal. Think of a dinosaur and it will probably be from this or the Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation. This means that the Jurassic Stegosaurus stenops had a lot of neighbours. There was Nanosaurus, a relative of the Thyreophorans, the small ornithopod Dryosaurus, an early ankylosaur Gargoyleosaurus, and the ornithopod Camptosaurus. There is some evidence of Camptosaurus and Stegosaurus travelling together. Ornithopods and Thyreophorans travelling together seems to have been common. Ornithopods were attentive and could alert the group to a predator. The ornithopods would then run, while the slower but alerted Thyreophorans would stand their ground and block the predator from pursuing. Stegosaurus was big, but dwarfed in the Morrison Formation by the dominant herbivores, the sauropods. there was Camarasaurus, the large Apatosaurus, the long Diplodocus, the longer Barosaurus, and the giant Brachiosaurus. There were also theropod predators, Ornitholestes, an early Maniraptor, Silurus, a possible Silurosaur, Stegosaurus, an early Tyrannosauroid, Tanicolagrius, a true Silurosaur, and Martiosaurus, a Megalosauroid. All of these, apart from Martiosaurus, might have been feathered and would have posed little threat to Stegosaurus. The other predators are a different story. There was the horned Ceratosaurus, the big and strong Torvosaurus, and Allosaurus. Allosaurus is commonly described as the lion of the Jurassic, but that is a gross undersell. Allosaurus was a dominant predator, the likes of which the Earth has rarely seen. This was the predator to beat if you wanted to survive. However, there was also the huge Saurophagonax, one of the largest predators of the late Jurassic and an allosaur relative. It is possible, though, that Saurophagonax was an especially large species of Allosaurus. Stegosaurus stenops did not seem to be a wanderer. It is often found along with Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus, and Allosaurus. It is probable that Stegosaurus preferred the same areas as these sauropods. Stegosaurus homheni was found in the Tuvalu group in China. This group includes fossils of two pterosaurs, Tsungaripterus and Neuropterus. In the same area were found the early ceratopsian Psittacosaurus, Giunicus, a theropod somewhere between groups, Xinjiangovenita, a possible early relative of the dromaeosaurs, and Kelmeiosaurus, a large Carcharodontosaurid of the allosaur group. Stegosaurus lived in a world of giants, but remained formidable. It would later be replaced by the more heavily armed and armoured ankylosaurs, but its eye-catching plates and deadly thagomizers made some of the fiercest killers of the Jurassic know that it was not to be messed with. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, show your opinion with a thumbs up and share it with others. Maybe subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Why not post a comment on what dinosaur you'd like me to do a profile on next? By the way, these are dinosaur profiles. No pterosaurs or marine reptiles need apply. Note, I will not be doing Tyrannosaurus Rex in my next profile. I will be doing it eventually, I just want more experience so I can do it justice. If you want to further support this channel, I have a book available on iBooks. It's interactive, has original illustrations, and has a number of interesting dinosaurs in it, including Stegosaurus. Link in the description. My next video will be on the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs, of the two mass extinctions that led to them dominating the Earth, and the mass extinction that led to their downfall. Hope to see you then.